Week 8 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few quarterbacks I have as sleeper options this week. The first quarterback, Jameis Winston of the Cleveland Browns. And Jameis Winston now getting an opportunity as a starter with Deshaun Watson out for the season, tearing the Achilles in last week's ball game. Jameis Winston, we know he's had some big seasons in his NFL career, including a 30-touchdown, 30-interception season in his career, a 5,000-yard season, and now the Week 8 starter for this Cleveland Brown team. So this week, not a great matchup versus the Baltimore Ravens, but they are vulnerable to giving up points. And also, there's a lot of garbage time that could be had in this ball game for Jameis Winston. So if you're in a pinch in 2 quarterback leagues, or if you have injuries at the position, he's available in 95% of fantasy leagues. And last week coming in, after Thompson Robinson got the first crack, Watson went down 67 pass yards, a touchdown and a 2-point conversion. Next sleeper is Russell Wilson. The Pittsburgh Steelers, Wilson was out the first 6 weeks of the season. Justin Fields was in there quarterback. And then last week, he got the starting job back was Russell Wilson. And versus a good New York Jet defense, 264 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown. So Wilson, he showed some grit in that ball game. It was a tough matchup versus a good defense, no doubt about it. And to go out there and put up over 25 fantasy points is definitely a big number. And this week, a good matchup versus the New York Giants. I know the Giants lead the league in sacks, but in terms of giving up points and having a bad secondary, I think Russell Wilson and George Pickens could hook up once again and have a good ball game in this one. And he's definitely a quarterback that's a sleeper option, available right now in 81% of fantasy leagues. And the final quarterback I have is a sleeper, Nix of the Denver Broncos. Bo Nix, he's on this sleeper list pretty much every week. And he's still available as well in tons of fantasy leagues as Bo Nix right now in 82% of fantasy leagues. So this Bronco team playing good football, winning 4 out of 5 bowl games. And Bo Nix, the last 2 out of 3 weeks, 20 or more fantasy points. And this week, a great matchup coming up versus the Carolina Panthers. So the last few games, week 5 versus the Raiders, 206 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, 9 rush yards, a rushing touchdown. Week 6 versus the Chargers, 216 passing, 2 touchdowns, an INT, 61 yards rushing. And last week, it was the running game and defense that did well for this Bronco team, where he didn't have to do much, 164 pass yards and 75 rushing yards. So believe it or not, he's a top 5 quarterback in rushing yards this season, is Bo Nix, available in 82% of leagues. If he could get you 7 points a week running the football, and if he could throw for 150, 200 yards with a touchdown or 2, he's going to put in good performances. So right now, with a good matchup versus the Panthers that give up the 4th most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season, he's definitely a sleeper option this week. So that's a few quarterbacks I have as sleepers for Week 8 of the fantasy football season.